Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The court, having evaluated in the aggregate all the evidence presented by the parties, considers the guilt of the defendant proven and awards her punishment of 10 years imprisonment in a general regime colony. The cold mechanical voice was interrupted by the desperate cry of the defendant. How could this be? How could it be so? Her lawyer also looked at the judge, unable to hide his bewilderment. He had not expected such a cruel sentence. Emily herself was sobbing, covering her face with her hands and remembering minute by minute the day her life began to fall apart. She sat at the window in her room, in front of a cup of coffee that had long since cooled, a week after she had been discharged from the hospital. Why had she been saved? After all, there was no reason to go on living, and no strength to relive what had happened. 6 months passed after she was discharged from the maternity hospital empty-handed. The baby had died, hadn't survived, and she'd already thought of a name. Ethan was the name of his father, the only man she'd ever loved, who'd abandoned Emily as soon as she'd announced her pregnancy. For 6 months, she waited for it to get easier, but it was getting harder and scarier. When the doctor at the next checkup informed her that everything was fine and she would live, Emily bluntly asked, "Why?" "Well, don't. So you are still young, everything will still be, and you will get married and have as many children as you want." Emily just turned her back to the wall. This doctor is not a young man. He thinks he is probably smart and experienced, but he doesn't understand simple things. She doesn't need any children, she needs John. And the future? Well, yes, she will have a future. Maybe a husband and children. At first they will, and then they will also go away, one way or another, leaving her alone, because everything in her life is going away, her parents, her beloved, her son. Emily's parents tragically died when she was only 9 years old or already 9. She was big enough to understand the horror of what had happened, all the irreparable loss. But in the orphanage, she did not live a day. The girl was immediately taken by her uncle and aunt. Uncle Edward was a sibling of the deceased mother. They're with Aunt Betty. The marriage was infertile, in addition to still take the girl for upbringing. They officially adopted her, but Emily never learned to call her foster parents mom and dad because she remembered her own parents too well. Or maybe the aunts and uncles themselves, though they treated Emily very well, never became real parents. Life was going quite well. Emily graduated from school, entered the institute, and then fell in love. Ethan was already graduating from the same institute. He was not considered the first handsome man, but he was successful with girls, maybe also because he was a guy from a rich family. They said that a warm place for him after graduation was assured. On a pretty freshman, he initially did not pay attention, but once their eyes met. Thus began the first romance in Emily's life. She really fell in love and was sure that Ethan took their relationship seriously. But in the meantime, she was warned. One day, one girl stopped Emily in the hallway and, after some idle chit-chat, as if by the way, said, "You, Ethan, don't get too carried away with him. He's been making such a pass at you for nothing. After he's had a fight with Jennifer." "What are you talking about?" "I thought so." Emily grinned. She was so happy these days that she couldn't help smiling even at the most inappropriate occasions. And her friend's words didn't hurt her much. She was probably just jealous. They had Ethan, and the relationship had been going on for months now. He'd said he loved her, even hinted at a wedding. She'd seen Ethan before, of course, before they'd met some girl, but there was no telling what had come before. So she decided to ask about this Jennifer the next time they met. "How much did you love her?" "More than you loved me." As if in jest, she asked, "Jennifer who?" "Surprised and slightly gloomy beloved." "Oh, that one? We didn't have anything. We were just dating, nothing special. And what did you want? You should not have messed with an old man. I'm still 5 years older. It's not my fault you were still in kindergarten when I was dating someone else." That's how this conversation about Ethan's past ended. Emily decided there wasn't much to talk about. Old man, not old man, but really, how did he know he'd meet her? She looked into Ethan's eyes and suddenly thought, I wonder if our children's eyes will be light blue like his or darker like mine. She was surprised at the thought because they hadn't talked about children yet. It wasn't because Ethan had something in his past that had passed. Emily had been lucky enough to meet the love of her life, and it wasn't just her. Even Betty could see that it was love. You're in love, aren't you? That's good, of course, but I have to graduate first. What's the big deal? I'll finish. The girl laughed. It was really funny to her. How could a happy marriage prevent her from getting an education? On the contrary, she would have more incentive, but Ethan was slow to propose. He hinted at something like that at first, but now he won't say a word. He's got his career on the upswing. Perhaps it's connected with this that the thoughts about organizing his personal life were pushed to the background. Time was running out, and Emily was getting ready to graduate. Should she remind him of that? No, Emily would never dare to do that. Where is it seen that a girl proposes to her boyfriend? But it suddenly became clear that the proposal would have to be rushed. After she felt pregnant, this pleased the girl, not only because now Ethan will definitely not refuse, will make the only right decision. She herself really wanted a child from her lover. Having taken the test, Emily was ready to run to tell Ethan the good news, but the next date was postponed and postponed. They talked only on the phone, and not often. Ethan kept referring to business, and his voice was so serious and guilty at the same time. He felt that he was hurting his Emily with his inattention, but finally they met. Emily decided not to delay with the recognition. Right after the greeting, she said, "Congratulations, Ethan. We're having a baby together. I took a test, though it's clear without it. It's already 2 months." And she faltered when she saw the look in Ethan's eyes. There was no joy in it, but what was, she couldn't understand. 2 months? That's good. It's not too late. It's not too late. What's not too late? Aren't you glad, honey? Confused asked Emily. She suddenly felt that something terrible was coming, and it happened. It's not too late for an abortion. Yes, I'm sorry, Emily, but you won't have to. You and I will have nothing more. No more baby, no more future. What are you talking about? What, abortion? Why? Don't say that. Don't scare me. I'm sorry, Emily, but everything was a mistake. I can't marry you. We have to break up. It was to tell you this that I decided to meet you today. Ethan blurted out, "Break up how? Have to who? You love me, don't you?" Emily couldn't believe she was hearing such words from the man she loved. "I did. Yes, I loved you, and I loved you very much. I really thought we'd always be together, but I was wrong. Emily, I don't want to deceive you. I don't see the point in dragging this relationship any further. I don't want you to be in a difficult position. Don't worry, I'll pay for the surgery and the recovery. I'll pay for everything, Emily. You will? You'll pay for everything? And how much will you value my services and the life of our child?" The girl finally believed in the reality of what was happening, and the words about money just knocked the ground out from under her feet. "Don't be like that, Emily." Ethan's tone was guilty, but irritated too. He obviously didn't expect such a conversation. "Our child doesn't have a life yet, and I'm not talking about paying for any services. I told you I loved you. And the money? Well, any amount you name. I do feel guilty about it, but believe me, I didn't lie to you before. I don't want to lie to you now. You feel guilty? Good for you. Don't lose weight from guilt and keep your money. Do me a favor. It'll come in handy. Go on, go home. Suffer from your guilt there. I won't wish you luck. It's always with you. And Emily turned her back and walked away. This monstrous conversation took place, fortunately, not in a cafe or at Ethan's house. They had just stopped in a square, whence, as the girl thought, they would go either to him or, better still, to her house. He should finally introduce himself to her parents before he asked for her hand in marriage. It's a good thing at least it's not in public. Emily walked away, holding back as hard as she could and expecting Ethan to catch up with her every minute, apologizing, saying he'd made a stupid joke. No one caught up with her, and already at the exit from the square, she realized that she couldn't hold back any longer, tears streaming from her eyes. How could she cry such grief? She was alone, abandoned by her lover. Yes, Emily was still in love with Ethan, and not just abandoned, but pregnant with his child. It was impossible to go home like this. Betty would guess. She'd ask questions and give advice. And that was the worst thing Emily could do, but she couldn't sit outside and cry in front of everyone. Now it's still not crowded, but it's a weekend. Good weather. Soon old men and old women will come, mothers with small children in love. And she also walked here in love, not long ago, and soon she will be pushing a stroller in front of her. But she will not be a happy old lady walking along these alleys with her husband. She is lonely and will always be lonely. With such thoughts, and until evening she wandered, choosing the most deserted corners. She did not want to be seen by people in such a dead state, but it was getting dark and she had to go home. Her aunt greeted her with her usual, "You're out late, young lady." She immediately noticed her niece's mood. "Why are you so sour? Did you have a fight with your beau?" "We broke up," Emily said in a strangled voice. Her parents hadn't seen Ethan yet, and they couldn't form any opinion about him, except that they were surprised that he didn't come in and meet his girlfriend's parents. And now Aunt Helen paid little attention to the girl's words, waved them away. Well, it's a common thing. Today quarrel today, tomorrow make up. Is it worth crying once more? Are you going to have dinner? No, I don't feel like it. Emily went to the bathroom, going to tidy up her tear-stained face a little, and having managed it, she slipped into her room, not wanting to talk to anyone, especially since the conversation was going to be serious. It wasn't hard to imagine how the foster parents would react to the news of her pregnancy. So far they showed understanding and did not pester the girl, who, as they believed, quarreled with her fiancé. Emily and in the morning tried to go to the institute unnoticed, without breakfast. After classes she came home at once, closed herself in her room again, but this time Aunt Helen decided not to let everything go to waste, knocked and came in and sat down in a chair. "Are you killing yourself again? What, so serious?" "Yes." Emily sighed. "Did you run away after you found out about it?" She nodded at the girl's still perfectly flat stomach. "What are you staring at? Have you forgotten what I do for a living?" "I found out before you did. Betty worked at the local hospital as an obstetrician-gynecologist, so I guess reproduction was no mystery to her." "Yeah, I decided to tell Emily. I told her yesterday, and tears ran down her cheeks again. The aunt sat up to her, put her arm around her shoulders. "Enough, dear, enough," she cried, "and will be. It's a common thing. We must think how to fix everything now." "How can you fix it now?" She was crying in 3 streams, Emily, leaning on her foster mom's shoulder. "He said he didn't love me, that he was wrong." "What a bastard." "Fine, he doesn't love you. Don't love him either." Okay. I'm trying, but I'm failing. It'll work when we get rid of the consequences. I'll make an appointment for you tomorrow. You'll take the tests. The day after tomorrow we'll do everything. You'll see, they'll scrape his memory out along with it. You mean we have to do it? The day after tomorrow? The day after tomorrow. You've only got a little time left. You can't drag it out. No, I don't want to. It's the first one. What if there's no kids afterwards? Where did you hear such nonsense? It was like that in the Stone Age, when you pulled it out with a crochet hook. What about now? Now it's one case in a million, and that's if the girl is sick, and the doctor is crooked, but you're fine, and the doctor will be the very same. Aunt Helen smiled encouragingly, and Emily had a chill running down her spine at how ordinary she was talking about such important things. No, I don't want him to stay. I don't want to kill the baby. That's right. I've heard all kinds of nonsense. What kind of baby is there? It's when it's born, then you'll have a baby. Do you think it's for fun? So let's go and don't make up stuff. Do you know how many girls like you pass through here every day? Not murderers, normal girls who think about their future. Who'd want you with a kid? I'll need myself and the baby. I'm not getting married. You're not going to get married now and then. Are you going to have a baby every year from who knows who? And sit on our Edward's neck? I won't sit around and have babies, don't worry. Emily cried angry tears, but her aunt was not going to back down. The next day, she almost forcibly took her adopted daughter to her hospital. However, not so much and forcefully, the work carried out by her aunt gave the result, and the girl herself thought about whether it is not easier for her to really get rid of the unplanned pregnancy. Aunt Helen was right. She had to finish the institute, find a job, and with a child in her arms, it would be too hard. Auntie so colorfully described all the hardships of raising babies as if she had raised a dozen herself. And I'm not old, I'm not retired, and I'm not going to quit my job, so from me a lot of help. Do not expect a lot of help. And no one is chasing you home, of course, but you know, Edward and I won't be happy either. So Emily went to the hospital, calming herself with the fact that today she would only take tests, and then maybe they would tell her that it was too late, or it was impossible for some indications. And so it turned out, the head doctor, having familiarized himself with Emily's card, said to the aunt, "Why didn't you, Betty, know that she is R negative, and this is already serious? The girl is young, we cannot deprive her of children forever. So after the surgery, I won't be able to have kids." Emily guessed, "You'll have everything." The auntie's voice was so loud. "Why are you, Benjamin, scaring her? It used to be like that, but now it's nothing. I'm obliged to warn the patient of all the risks." The doctor cut her off. "And the risk of infertility or inability to carry further pregnancies is quite high." "Then I'm sorry, I won't do anything." "I'm sorry, Aunt Helen." And the girl hurriedly left the office. She felt great relief, as if she had escaped mortal danger. Even the bitterness of parting with Ethan had receded for the time being. "I've done nothing to my child. Let it be a boy. I will name him John." She realized that she still had a difficult conversation to have with her aunt, but that didn't scare her either. "If they are so afraid that I will sit on my neck, and the child will not give rest, then I can and move, rent an apartment or a room. You can work without higher education, and remotely, in a word, I will not be lost. When this woman without a man was lost. Never." Emily braved. In the evening she was really waiting for an unpleasant scene. So, did the heroine's mother run away? "You won't kill anyone. You won't be barren." "Oh, how nice. How are you going to live?" "I mean, I have a rough idea, but I doubt that it will suit all the adults and sensible people here. Right, Edward? She tried to get her uncle on her side, but it turns out he had an opinion. What's the matter with you, Betty? She's an adult, thank God. She's a smart girl, she'll be fine. Right, Emily? And we'll help in any way we can. She doesn't want to be barren forever. We've lived without children. Is that a good thing? She'll have no nephews, and now we'll have a grandson like all normal people. So we're not normal, Detective. I'm infertile. I'm out of the field. My word doesn't mean anything anymore. Tears rang in Betty's voice. She slammed the door and ran out of the room, shutting herself in her bedroom. Emily gestured for her uncle to stop, going after her. Aunt Helen was crying, face buried in a pillow. The girl sat down beside her, put her arm around her shoulders, began to coax her affectionately. Betty's mom. Sometimes Emily called her that. In such situations, when it was necessary to comfort, upset, sick, or tired aunt. Well, don't be upset. What's wrong with having another person who will love you as much as Uncle Edward and I do? So much for being a mom. Betty sobbed, as if I hadn't just been called infertile and superfluous in this world. But did I say that? Did Uncle Edward say that? I never even thought so. You didn't give birth to anyone, but you raised me that way. I'm sorry, I can't call you Mom. I still remember my mom as if she were alive. And you, how many children have you helped bring into the world? How many people have you been the first person they've ever seen? And you want to stop your own grandson from being born. Don't you get it, Fox? I'm not thinking about my grandson, not about myself, but about you and your life. How is the Institute now? How's work and personal life, which is also important? Yes, everything will be fine. I'll take a sabbatical leave, then I'll finish, and if not, people live just as well without education. We have a girl who had a baby right after school. Enough about girls. I see them every day and more than one, but what will happen to you? Who's your father? The aunt's question brought Emily back to the memories of the collapse of her love. She gloomed, bit her lip. Let's not talk about that. Well, no, my baby doesn't have a daddy. What can you do? Betty only shook her head at such words. Well, no. There was really nothing to be done, but it would be wrong to say that Emily had thrown the father of her child out of her mind and heart so quickly. At first, she remembered Ethan constantly and waited for him. Every phone call made her heart flutter. What if? But no, it wasn't him. Walking to the Institute, coming home, she waited for him to catch up with her, to stop her, to say something that would relieve her of that aching longing. Sometimes it seemed to her that there he was, walking toward Ethan, her favorite and only man. But no, the passerby came closer and turned out to be a very different person from Ethan. The aunt, seeing Emily's condition, calmed her down. Well, don't be so gloomy. Cheer up. You decided to give birth, so wear it carefully, or else you lie at home all day long, not eating, not drinking. And then you'll give birth to a sad little baby. Go for a walk, look at the beautiful. Think about the good. Nothing terrible has not happened, and you'll see in a month and will not remember about this his. It's easy to say, but how to survive at least this month? What good to think about when everything you look at reminds you of him, of Ethan? It was hard on Emily, but it turned out that the bad news wasn't over yet. One day, as she was walking down the hall at the Institute, past a group of chattering girls, one of them grabbed her arm. Wait, Emily, what about you? Were you invited to the wedding? No one invited me, and who's getting married again? Replied Emily, feeling for some reason that her heart trembled. It's true. Yes, Ethan is yours, but you've met him, haven't you?" The girl danced impatiently, apparently eager to see someone else's grief, but Emily didn't give her that pleasure. She stretched her lips into a rubbery smile and waved it away, trying to keep her voice lighthearted. "Oh, what did you remember?" "I haven't seen him in a long time. He didn't invite me, of course, but whatever. I'll probably be dancing on mine soon," and I hurried away. She didn't cry, no. Apparently the tears had been wiped away. Since our final breakup, it's only been 2 weeks, and he's already getting married, so he was still dating me and someone else at the same time. And he said work, business. Was he lying to her? What's the difference? He lied to her, but he loved her. He was afraid of losing her, and he doesn't care about me, even though he's pregnant. Why should he? He'll have other kids with the one he loves, and he doesn't care about mine. That's it, John. Your daddy doesn't want us, he won't even see us. Nobody wants us. Oh no, what am I saying? We need each other. When am I really? Just because I have you, I can be grateful to my dad. At home, she did not tell anyone that Ethan would soon marry, did not share her worries. There was no need for it, but it was very difficult to pretend to be calm, satisfied with life. But it would be even more difficult to answer questions about the reasons for such a state. Calm aunt, uncle, they, of course, wished her only good. It is understandable, but for Emily the greatest happiness now was that everyone left her alone. However, the pregnancy was going quite well. There were no complications, not even toxicosis. Betty, she wondered. Everyone should have such an easy pregnancy, and there'd be no need for doctors. Well, you'll probably have an easy birth too. So don't worry and don't be afraid of anything. Yes, it's good to have your own gynecologist doctor at home, who always looks after the course of pregnancy. Because Emily was still worried about the baby and was afraid of labor, probably not for nothing. Because it all started, of course, on schedule, without promising any complications. However, something went wrong during labor, and she had to have a cesarean section. Because Emily did not hear the first cry of her child, did not see the moment of his birth, she was unconscious, under anesthesia. And when she came to herself in the intensive care unit, the first thing she asked was to be shown the baby, or at least told what was wrong with him. The nurses hid their eyes, ran away, and the girl already realized that she would not hear anything good. The reality was terrible. The baby had not survived. But how could it? Cried the girl. After all, everything was fine. Everything was normal. No one said that there would be such problems. Unfortunately, it happens. That's all she heard in response, especially since it was not the fault of the doctors. Indeed, there were unforeseen circumstances in which no one could not help. And it was her own aunt, her adoptive mother, who delivered the baby. She consoled Emily as best she could. Don't cry, girl. Everything will be all right. Everything. You'll have more children. And this one, where is he? Can I bury him? Can I see him, even if he's dead? You can't, sweetheart. There's no need for that, you know? You can't, really. I'm sorry, but it's impossible. It was all right, Aunt Helen, but you saw it, didn't you? That's exactly what I saw. Yes, everything was fine, and this is how it ended. It's not an isolated incident. It happens to many people. But why did it have to happen to me? Emily sobbed, and after one of the doctors said that her operation was not very successful, and most likely she would not have children, she realized that there was no sense in her life anymore. After all, she wanted this particular child, and the fact that she could give birth to as many more as her aunt said would not have consoled her much, and to realize that she was forever alone, even without children, was unbearable. In this condition, Emily was discharged home after a short time. Betty felt that she should forget everything and begin to move on with her life. How can I live now? I don't want to. I don't want anything anymore. The depression was unbearable. Not only to go to the institute, Emily could not get out of bed at all. Her aunt hardly poured sweet tea or coffee into her by spoonfuls, fed her crumbs of food, forcing her to get up, to go to the bathroom, to the toilet. Emily could just sit on the floor and sit on the way. She had no energy for anything. That's when the worst happened. Unable to bear her condition, the girl swallowed pills. Fortunately, her relatives were ready for it, did not leave her, and noticed in time what she had done. The doctors were called, and Emily was saved. Saved from death, but not from the black depression that was eating her soul. Edward sympathized with the girl's condition and looked for ways out, but Betty was fed up with it all. You know, Emily, this is finally funny. Yes, I realize you've had a big disaster, but it happens to a lot of women, and everyone gets over it somehow. You're not 40 years old after all, and it's not the end of your life. So please pull yourself together. No one is going to coddle you. I feel really good. Leave me alone. I can't take it anymore, you know? Maybe you're right. Things will get better someday. Things couldn't get better, of course, and still Emily revived a little, but she had to. Soon the sad news came from Edward's homeland. Some relative of his had died, and he and Betty had to go to the funeral. I hope you'll let us go for a week, asked the aunt. After all, you're an adult, and you have to take responsibility for your actions. We can't just live with your problems. Of course you can go. It's all over now. I realize that all this is useless and even harmful. I won't do anything more to myself. Yes, you'll do your best, dear. Remember, we really, really need you. We're not taking you with us because it would be too hard on you. I won't go myself. Don't worry, I'll recover somehow. And you don't leave me any food, so I'll move faster. That's how Emily tried to calm her relatives and herself too. She didn't want to die, although she didn't have the strength to live either. It's funny, she thought. I can't live, I can't die, I have no luck in anything. But they say that everything is getting better. Maybe things will somehow go well for me too. That fateful morning she got up, realized she could eat something, brewed herself some coffee, and made a sandwich. Emily put the baby next to me in the bed, lay down herself, and fell soundly, blissfully asleep next to her, with the child peacefully sleeping. For the first time she fell asleep without sedatives, without sleeping pills, in a deep, happy sleep. Emily was awakened by the doorbell. It was the police. They found her without much difficulty from the surveillance footage. Emily had to pack up, collect the baby, and travel with him to the police station. On the way, she tried to explain how she had this child, but she wasn't really listened to. Explain everything to the investigator. She tried to tell the investigator as well. The baby was in her bag. She'd left it at home. I found it on the floor, you know? The girl tried to prove it. Then a man burst into the office. Where's my baby? He screamed. Who dared to steal him? Did she? He jumped up to Emily, grabbed her shoulder, and yanked her arm away as if he had been burned. Emily? Ethan? The girl exhaled. Do you know her? The investigator asked sternly. I knew her before. We were going to get married, and then I married someone else. Well, that's your motive. Satisfied, said the investigator. Emily, how could you? You never forgave me, and decided to take revenge in such a wild way? What's the child got to do with it? No, Ethan, I wasn't going to take revenge on anyone. I didn't know whose baby it was. I told you I found it. That's your son. The girl's eyes were blurry. Okay, that's a story I hear 100 times a day. You all find money and guns like that. Now it's kids too, all out on the street. The investigator cut me off. Are you going to write a statement, man? Of course, I almost went crazy. I've lost my wife, and now I've lost my son. The man's voice trembled. He was barely holding back tears. Ethan, believe me. Emily begged. I'm ready to go to jail. I'm ready to go anywhere. But believe me, I meant no harm. Emily. Tiredly, Ethan said. Good people find a stray dog and paste ads all over the city looking for owners, realizing that someone is suffering. And you're going to talk about kindness, fines, and miraculous coincidence? Don't embarrass yourself. He walked out. Emily was alone with the investigator again. She could see in his eyes that the man didn't believe her. Mason, a young lawyer who had already won several cases, was eating breakfast and looking through the newspaper. His attention was caught by a front-page story about the kidnapping of a child from a prominent businessman. There was a picture of the perpetrator in the paper. Mason took a closer look, and the face looked familiar. Could it be Emily? He thought in astonishment, recognizing in the accused a former classmate. What could have happened to her that she dared to do such a thing? No, I'm wrong. Or is it her? Mason remembered Emily perfectly well. In high school, he was even in love with her. But after graduation, they never even saw each other. And there was nothing between them during school except for the occasional secret glances in class. Can you believe that this serious, neat, excellent student suddenly, for some unknown reason, became a criminal? And what a criminal! A child kidnapper. It was unthinkable. I should meet with her, offer my services, find out all the circumstances, and then we'll see what we can do to help. He managed to get a date with Emily. She, of course, recognized the former classmate, but the atmosphere for memories of school years was not the most suitable, which the girl and reported with sad irony. That's not why I'm here, Emily. I'm a lawyer, and I suggest you make a contract with me. I will try to understand all the circumstances of the case and defend you in court. For free, of course, remembering how you let me cheat in class without a word. Thank you, Mason. I just feel like it's pointless. Everyone's against me. I've noticed that, but I'm gonna be on your side, and I'm gonna do everything I can. Just tell me the whole truth about what happened. You see, even you can't believe it, and I'm not lying. I did find that child in an abandoned building. The girl told the story of how she found the child. She also told her aunt the whole truth, and the latter believed, but was amazed at the rash act of her adopted daughter. How could she do that? I don't understand. You're a grown woman. If you found a coin on the ground and took it for yourself, it would be understandable. But it's a child. Betty wailed. I believe you, of course, but why didn't you call the police or an ambulance? You should have done it right away, or at least after you got home. Emily covered her face with her hands, crying helplessly. You see, I could have had a baby too. I had one. He died in childbirth. You don't know how I suffered. I wanted to die. Don't nod. You don't understand. You're not a woman. And when I found this child, my eyes blurred. I thought it was my son, though I had no idea it was the son of the man I loved. Such a coincidence. I don't know how he ended up being thrown to his death. I saved him, for what it's worth, and now I'm going to be judged for it. Don't despair. I hope we have a good chance at a suspended sentence, and that's the worst-case scenario. To be honest, Mason himself did not really believe in such a favorable outcome. The investigation was fast and sloppy. The case seemed pretty clear. A woman had stolen her former lover's infant child. and she did it for a completely incomprehensible purpose. She couldn't help but realize that no one would let her keep the baby. Then what did she intend to do with the boy? It is still unknown why her own son died was not the fault of a woman who did not want to be a single mother, but the personality of the victim, that is, the father of little Harry, caused unequivocal sympathy. The man had buried his beloved wife, who had been killed in an automobile accident only 2 months before, and his son was his only joy. It is not hard to imagine what a nightmare the kidnapping of the child had become for him. All witnesses unanimously assured that he loved his son, cared for him. And the story that the baby was abandoned on some construction site or dump looked ridiculous, a silly fiction. Yes, he had once had an affair with the defendant, but that was before the marriage, and Emily's claim that she allegedly gave birth by him, Ethan, was also unfounded. They did not live together. She could give birth by anyone. Under such circumstances, there was nothing to investigate. The case was brought to court, although the accused refused to admit guilt. Her lawyer tried to do something for her client. Yes, it is their right, but frankly speaking, all their attempts to justify themselves looked extremely ridiculous, so no one especially did not delay the investigation. Soon all the materials were transferred to the court. The trial would be swift and unjust. Mason's mind was racing. Emily was confused, withdrawn. She continued to stand her ground, repenting for not calling the police, and that was all. The lawyer, too, was not allowed to develop her thoughts. To choose the right line of defense was interrupted time and again. But when the victim and his defense counsel spoke, many in the audience wiped away tears. So emotionally, Ethan described his suffering over the loss of his child. So asked for the perpetrator, the harshest punishment, because when this kidnapper will be free, not only he, but also other parents will not be able to sleep well. Hardly she will stop. As a result, the court's sentence was unexpectedly and unjustifiably harsh. The kidnapper received 10 years in prison. Emily was sobbing. Her foster mother was too. Mason was in shock. It was his first lost case, but he was not going to accept it. Already after the trial, reassuring Emily, he firmly promised, "Don't doubt, I won't leave this case like this. I'll look into it myself and demand a review." Ethan stood over his son's crib, gazing with delight at his miracle. Harry was sleeping sweetly, a faint half-smile on his lips, wondering what would have happened to his father's life if something had happened to the boy. Just in that little body, so fragile and delicate, was now centered the life of Ethan himself. If only this terrible accident had not left a trace on the child's further development. No, he's small. He didn't understand or remember anything. Ethan calmed himself. Well, what's Emily like? Who would have thought that this nice girl would turn into a monster? What was she going to do with a baby? All her tales about keeping it for herself, bringing it up as her own. It's a load of crap. Who would believe that? It's lucky that she was quickly identified and caught, or we don't know what she could have gotten up to. It turns out that she also gave birth to a son, but either dead or died. And why? Her aunt said that everything was fine during the whole pregnancy. Not otherwise, she did something herself to keep the child away. And her aunt was a doctor herself. She could help. And at the trial they sat there crying. If they'd gotten rid of their own, it was better not to think about what would have happened to Harry if that thing hadn't been caught on the security cameras. Ethan shook his head, as if trying to get rid of the terrible thoughts. And after all, he loved that woman. Well, yeah, not in the right way, I guess. But who was to blame Jennifer? Jennifer had been Ethan's first, almost childish love. They weren't even 16 years old yet, and they already realized it was fate. and they really were made for each other. Both beautiful, both children of very wealthy parents, that is, there was no material interest in each other. Parents knew about this friendship of their children and did not oppose, believed in their prudence, and not in vain. Ethan and Jennifer became a real couple after they came of age and entered the institute. They agreed to get married after graduation, but on the next vacation Jennifer went alone without Ethan. He was already working part-time at his father's firm and had to participate in important negotiations. He was a little resentful of the girl for leaving, and jealous, of course. She didn't call, though I promised, and she came back looking different. Maybe he thought it was for a good reason. But what does it matter now? But back then, he couldn't come to his senses for a year, until he met Emily. Yes, it was the acquaintance with a new girl that allowed him to forget about the mental trauma that Jennifer had caused him, who really didn't even try to establish a relationship, soon transferred to another institute and perhaps started a different life. Ethan tried not to know anything more about her. He was fine with Emily, even better than with Jennifer, somehow calmer, more reliable. It was just that they delayed the marriage, but maybe it was for the best. He would have run away from his lawfully wedded wife after Jennifer came back. "Hello, Ethan. We seem to have made a very big mistake." There was no other explanation and no argument about how they'd spent years apart. None of that mattered anymore. Ethan realized that he couldn't live without Jennifer, the one he'd loved all along, and Emily he'd only tried to love. But he didn't dare to tell the girl about it right away. He saw how much Emily loved him. She would suffer, but he couldn't deceive Jennifer either. Moreover, after their second meeting, she announced that she was expecting a child. That day, he was the happiest man and met with Emily the next day to inform her of the breakup. And it should happen that this very day, and Emily announced her pregnancy, just like in a bad melodrama, like a vulgar joke. Are you two conspiring? But he didn't need two children, almost the same age from different women, and when choosing between two, one of whom is good for everything and the other loved to the hilt, men don't usually make mistakes. Perhaps he was wrong in not taking more interest in Emily's life. Had she terminated the pregnancy? Had she decided to give birth? He had simply forgotten about this girl. Soon after, he and Jennifer were married, and were people happier than they were? And then began a real family life, compared to which everything that did not concern them, the two of them, did not matter at all. All the more so when his wife's health problems began, not with her, but with the course of her pregnancy. Ethan, a man far from medicine, could not understand the complicated explanations of doctors. He simply spent all his free time with his beloved, and there was not much of it. The closer to childbirth, the more anxious became on the soul, mainly because of the fact that the doctors looked worried, talked about all sorts of risks, were wrong. Listen to them after that, these doctors. Jennifer gave birth to a wonderful baby boy. She endured everything, but she gave birth. And she promised another one. But in between there'll be another girl. She said after discharge, smiling happily over the crib. That's how she was remembered, happy, beautiful, dreaming of a long life together, of children. It was not given to her to live this life, to give birth to a daughter and another son. She had to go to her doctor. She made an appointment, but while she was dealing with Harry, she was almost late. She decided to drive herself for the first time after childbirth. It wasn't far, but there was an accident at a busy intersection. Jennifer was killed on the spot. If it weren't for his son, Ethan wouldn't have survived. He wouldn't have killed himself. He would have died of terror. What would it be like to never see Jennifer again? To realize that someone you had embraced and loved just a week ago was lying in the damp earth. And Jennifer was a wonderful mother, and how could a son be without her? There were no relatives to rely on. Jennifer's mother, after what she had been through, was in a very difficult position herself. Ethan's own parents had divorced by this time. His mother had married someone else and was now living abroad. The only way out was to find a good nanny. This succeeded, but it turned out that the nanny also needed a rest sometimes. Nora, a longtime Jennifer friend, came to the rescue. During his wife's lifetime, Ethan disliked this vivacious, fidgety girl. She turned out to be a fake, two-faced. Plus, he'd noticed her interest in him a few times at family parties. She had tried to get his attention even before Ethan and Jennifer married, but no one would succeed. Ethan had been faithful to his beloved, but after Nora had sobbed heartily at her friend's funeral, after she'd come up to Ethan, swollen with tears, and told him she was ready for any help, even if it meant babysitting around the clock, he was ashamed of himself for thinking of this girl. Yes, she was young, lonely, and flirtatious, so what was wrong with that? But how sincere was she about the death of her friend, how worried about her and Jennifer's son? Before they found a good, experienced nanny with excellent references, Noriah had devoted all her time to Harry, and she'd had no complaints about her care. She took care of Ethan, cooked meals, served meals, prepared clean clothes for each day, all without a shadow of flirtation. Just did what was necessary, almost silently, limiting herself to only the most necessary words. Then she made arrangements with the nanny for when it would be necessary to fill in for her, and just as silently she got ready to leave. "Thank you for everything, Nora. I don't know how I would have done it without you," said Ethan. "Come on, Ethan. I'm not doing all this for you. I'm doing it in memory of Jennifer and Harry. I'll be back soon. Don't miss me. You're strong, Ethan. Hang in there." When she left, Ethan suddenly felt a kind of emptiness. Yes, Nanny was with Harry. Everything in the house was fine. But the young widower, for the first time, felt his loneliness. Nora was like a link between him and the Jennifer who was gone forever. She had been in the house before she was gone, and now she tried to keep everything in the same order it had been under Jennifer. Nanny, on the other hand, had become something of a barrier between Harry and her son. She looked after the child perfectly, maybe even better than Nora, guessed his every move, and Ethan was embarrassed to be too gentle with his son in front of her, to behave as he had done before. Ethan looked forward to the nanny's weekends, and Nora was visiting the orphaned family for a reason. She had noticed Ethan when she was still in high school, at the same age of 15, but he had already given his heart to Jennifer. That was, in Nora's opinion, simply unfair. Why does this Jennifer have everything? Beauty and intelligence and luck and parents, and now the best boyfriend and also from a rich family. Nora is more modest about it all, and that's why she started being friends with Jennifer in the first place, so she had more opportunity to be around Ethan. I mean, maybe someday she'd get his attention, but no way. He didn't see anyone but his Jennifer. When they grew up, Nora realized she had zero chance and made the biggest mistake of all. Married a man who seemed just as good as Ethan. It was even a bit of a peak for the lucky girl's girlfriend. "You're not married, but I was taken, and not just taken, but taken to another, much more high-status city." Yes, very soon she realized that her husband is not so rich, and life with him is not a fairy tale, and tortured returned home. And only then she learned that Jennifer and Ethan were separated, living apart, just at the time when Nora was far away, and it would be a chance to win the guy she needed. And now she's back to her broken trough, back when Jennifer was married and pregnant, and she's done the right thing, renewed her friendship with Jennifer, trying to become her own man in their house. She was not wasting her time. She had gained some metropolitan glamour, so it was not bad to get in her face more often, and something would happen, but not to win her friend away from her husband, but at least to sleep with him, having made her aware of it. Jennifer cheating will not forgive. It is a fact, and even better to eliminate the child, and maybe Jennifer. She took out a drug that can cause termination of pregnancy and guessed at her friend's house, began to slowly add it to tea, to juice. Small doses, of course, so that it would not be noticeable, will happen at her friend's miscarriage, and in a fortunate coincidence, and moreover, women sometimes die by childbirth. But Jennifer's organism, apparently, was strong. The pregnancy was not interrupted, although it was with complications, and Nora was guaranteed that the child would not survive. Therefore, when the friend was taken to the hospital, she was waiting for the tragic news from minute to minute, rehearsing in advance a lean face. And suddenly Jennifer, although with complications, but gave birth to a perfectly healthy boy. How could that be? Maybe she had a baby switched at the hospital. Well, that's an option that gives her options. She could convince Ethan that the baby wasn't his, but not head-on, of course, but subtly. That afternoon, Ethan was getting ready to pick his wife up from the hospital. Nora, of course, was going with him too, and when he came out of the front door, she was standing back and talking irritably to someone on the phone. What was all this gossip? It can't be. After all, Jennifer loves him so much, she said so herself. No, I don't believe it. Oh, really? No way. Yeah. My life will never be the same after this. Okay, they say half the fathers raise other people's kids without realizing it. But why would Ethan know that? After all, he's so happy. Oh, Ethan touched her shoulder. Who are you talking about? No reason, Ethan. Let's hurry. We're going to be late. Nora ranted. Don't mind her. It's just a friend of a friend calling talking. About me and Jennifer and our baby? Ethan asked, his face darkening. Really? No, of course not. It wasn't about you. That was Clara, the famous gossip. Who would listen to her? They got into the car and drove off, but Ethan stopped the car. Tell me, Nora, what is this gossip anyway? Jennifer didn't give birth to me. Stop dodging. I'm asking you seriously. Oh, come on, honestly. Nora cried. Why do you have to gather gossip? Because Jennifer loves you. And even if this baby wasn't yours, it's yours. How can you doubt that? All right, let's go. We'll figure it out, said Ethan. Come on, Ethan. I'm not doing all this for you. I'm doing it in memory of Jennifer and Harry. I'll be back soon. Don't miss me. You're strong, Ethan. Hang in there. When she left, Ethan suddenly felt a kind of emptiness. Yes, Nanny was with Harry. Everything in the house was fine. But the young widower, for the first time, felt his loneliness. Nora was like a link between him and the Jennifer who was gone forever. She had been in the house before she was gone, and now she tried to keep everything in the same order it had been under Jennifer. Nanny, on the other hand, had become something of a barrier between Harry and her son. She looked after the child perfectly, maybe even better than Nora, guessed his every move, and Ethan was embarrassed to be too gentle with his son in front of her, to behave as he had done before. Ethan looked forward to the nanny's weekends, and Nora was visiting the orphaned family for a reason. She had noticed Ethan when she was still in high school, at the same age of 15, but he had already given his heart to Jennifer. That was, in Nora's opinion, simply unfair. Why does this Jennifer have everything? Beauty and intelligence, and luck and parents, and now the best boyfriend, and also from a rich family. Nora is more modest about it all, and that's why she started being friends with Jennifer in the first place, so she had more opportunity to be around Ethan. I mean, maybe someday she'd get his attention, but no way. He didn't see anyone but his Jennifer. When they grew up, Nora realized she had zero chance and made the biggest mistake of all. Married a man who seemed just as good as Ethan. It was even a bit of a peak for the lucky girl's girlfriend. You're not married, but I was taken, and not just taken, but taken to another, much more high-status city. Yes, very soon she realized that her husband is not so rich, and life with him is not a fairy tale, and tortured returned home. And only then she learned that Jennifer and Ethan were separated, living apart, just at the time when Nora was far away, and it would be a chance to win the guy she needed. And now she's back to her broken trough, back when Jennifer was married and pregnant, and she's done the right thing, renewed her friendship with Jennifer, trying to become her own man in their house. She was not wasting her time. She had gained some metropolitan glamour, so it was not bad to get in her face more often, and something would happen, but not to win her friend away from her husband, but at least to sleep with him, having made her aware of it. Jennifer cheating will not forgive, it is a fact, and even better to eliminate the child, and maybe Jennifer. She took out a drug that can cause termination of pregnancy and guest at her friend's house, began to slowly add it to tea, to juice. Small doses, of course, so that it would not be noticeable, will happen at her friend's miscarriage, and in a fortunate coincidence, and moreover, women sometimes die by childbirth. But Jennifer's organism, apparently, was strong. The pregnancy was not interrupted, although it was with complications, and Nora was guaranteed that the child would not survive. Therefore, when the friend was taken to the hospital, she was waiting for the tragic news from minute to minute, rehearsing in advance a lean face. And suddenly Jennifer, although with complications, but gave birth to a perfectly healthy boy. How could that be? Maybe she had a baby switched at the hospital. Well, that's an option that gives her options. She could convince Ethan that the baby wasn't his, but not head-on, of course, but subtly. That afternoon, Ethan was getting ready to pick his wife up from the hospital. Nora, of course, was going with him too, and when he came out of the front door, she was standing back and talking irritably to someone on the phone. What was all this gossip? It can't be. After all, Jennifer loves him so much, she said so herself. No, I don't believe it. Oh, really? No way. Yeah. My life will never be the same after this. Okay, they say half the fathers raise other people's kids without realizing it, but why would Ethan know that? After all, he's so happy. Oh. Ethan touched her shoulder. Who are you talking about? No reason, Ethan. Let's hurry. We're going to be late. Nora ranted. Don't mind her. It's just a friend of a friend calling talking. About me and Jennifer and our baby? Ethan asked, his face darkening. Really? No, of course not. It wasn't about you. That was Clara, the famous gossip. Who would listen to her? They got into the car and drove off, but Ethan stopped the car. Tell me, Nora, what is this gossip anyway? Jennifer didn't give birth to me. Stop dodging. I'm asking you seriously. Oh, come on, honestly. Nora cried. Why do you have to gather gossip? Because Jennifer loves you. And even if this baby wasn't yours, it's yours. How can you doubt that? All right, let's go, we'll figure it out, said Ethan. Nora mentally rubbed her hands. The baby had been switched. By whom and why? It didn't matter. The main thing was that Ethan would probably take a DNA test and find out if he would forgive his wife for such perfidy. Probably not. Who will comfort him in his grief? Would it be his unfaithful girlfriend, Nora? Yes, 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 and yes again. There wasn't a happier person at this meeting from the birthing center, but suddenly the unexpected happened. The test showed that Ethan was the boy's birth father. So Nora had been cheated, sold the wrong drug, and she'd given a lot of money, and you can't complain to a cheater for that. And yet, fate was on her side. Jennifer died on her own, without any intervention from Nora. There was a child left. Yes, it is worse, but at first it is even by the way. There is a possibility to be near under the pretext of taking care of Harry. It is clear that immediately after the death of his wife, Ethan will not be to women. Well, you can and wait. I waited longer, and there will be seen. Maybe it will be possible to get rid of the child somehow. No, she wasn't going to kill anyone. Why should she? Maybe everything would go away by itself. She just needed to push things along, but first she had to become something more important to Ethan than just an au pair. He wasn't going to be a healthy young man who would be faithful to his dead wife forever. Turns out that wasn't so hard to achieve. After all, Ethan was a healthy young man, and Nora was a very attractive and dexterous woman, and an experienced manipulator. They had known each other for a long time since Jennifer's death, in fact lived under the same roof. Is it difficult to seduce a man in such an environment? Not hard, but it's much harder to establish yourself and become a legitimate wife. Okay, not all at once. Nora decided. I'll take it slowly but surely. Water treads water. Only the boy, yes, interferes. It would be good for me to get pregnant myself. And this one, yes, this one should be eliminated as soon as possible. I thought of the simplest way, but as it seemed right. Just left the child in a cold, empty house. I didn't hurt him with my own hands, so it wasn't murder. He could have survived, couldn't he? She thought as she hurried home with the stroller. An hour or two after her return, she, quite sincerely, dying of fear and excitement, called the police and Ethan's work, reported the kidnapping of the child. I could not do anything. Several people, by the look of thugs real, pushed me away from the stroller. One had a knife. I thought just want to rob. I gave them everything, my phone, money, took off my ring, and meanwhile some woman ran up, took Harry out of the stroller and ran. I followed her, started screaming. One of them pushed me. I fell down. I broke my knee. The girl was sobbing. When she calmed down a little, she described the bandits, referring to the suddenness of the incident and her fright. Ethan was terrified. This kidnapping could have put him and Nora at odds forever, and she was doing everything she could to prevent that from happening. My darling, my love, don't be angry. It wasn't my fault. I'd kill myself. You'll see, Harry will be found soon. They're looking for him. I'm sure they'll demand a ransom and bring our boy back alive and well. That's my boy, not ours. Ethan cut him off. A real mother would never allow such a thing to happen. She would fight for her child to the end. I did. Not every mother could do that. Do you know how many cases there are where babies are stolen from their own mothers? I don't know. I know my son was stolen from you, that's all. Let's drop it. Yeah. Well, I should have died for your boy. Keep your pocket. Nora thought angrily. And then the police called. Harry and his kidnapper had been found, and Nora was really worried. But everything turned out just fine. The villain was put on trial. Nora herself was not suspected of anything. True, Harry returned home to a loving father, and Ethan's attitude to the girl herself has changed somewhat. He decided not to entrust his son to his mistress anymore. Well, he's not going anywhere. I've got enough on his credit card for now. Yeah, Ethan trusted Nora with his card, and she handled it pretty freely. Lucky that idiot found the baby and took it for herself. Otherwise, I'd be in her shoes right now. Mason, meanwhile, was making his own investigation of this highly ambiguous case. He was concerned, of course, about the failure to win the trial, but he was even more concerned about Emily's fate. He was certain that she had been convicted quite unjustly. He decided to start his search from the very beginning, from the maternity hospital where Harry had been born. After all, the kidnapping itself looked extremely strange. Nobody made any demands, did not ask for any ransom, which means that the baby was kidnapped to simply leave in an empty building to certain death. If Emily was to be believed, that was the case, and Mason believed her. At the birthing center, he found out who else had given birth at the same time as Emily. He found out who delivered the baby. The findings were quite surprising and prompted a new action. The lawyer decided to talk to his client's adoptive father. "Tell me, Edward, did Emily's pregnancy really proceed without complications? Was the baby wanted? She's not married, though. I don't know much about pregnancy, but according to my wife and Emily's own condition, there were no difficulties." "Yes, she was unmarried, left by some scoundrel. I never saw him, so I can't say anything. She was very worried, cried a lot at first, but she was waiting for the baby. My wife insisted on the abortion, even dragged Emily to the hospital, but she still refused, went home. Helen was angry at first, but then she calmed down. Where could she go? So Emily was expecting and wanted this child. She sure did. She even bought him all sorts of things, hid them in her room so Betty wouldn't get angry. I was waiting for it myself. I don't have any of my own, but I thought it would be a baby. I love kids. But something happened. It didn't work out. I don't have grandchildren. Why didn't your wife tell you?" "What's the use of telling me? I'm not a medical man." It happened, and it happened. The next step was to visit the place where Emily found the baby. The abandoned, unfinished building was large, but there was hardly anything interesting to find there. The investigators and the curious, and maybe even the local homeless. The only thing that could be found was an abandoned pacifier, which Mason carefully placed in a bag, but that evidence had little to say. Mason decided to walk through the whole building. Maybe that way he could get to something. And he was not mistaken. On the second floor he met a rather young guy, a homeless man by the look of him. "Don't be afraid, I'm not from the police," called the lawyer. "I just have a few questions." "What should I be afraid of?" The guy answered cautiously. "Don't be afraid yourself, and what questions do you have for me?" "Do you come here often?" "I live here, so it's not clear." "I come here when I'm not going out. It's about the child found here on the first floor. You haven't heard about this case. I can't hear from anywhere. You see, there's no radio here and no TV with internet, but I managed to see something." And the homeless man mysteriously raised his eyes to the ceiling, obviously hinting at new questions and suggestions. Mason readily pulled a bill from his pocket. "So will you share your knowledge?" "And I will, if you're ready to share." The boy cheered, hiding the money. "Don't think that I'm just about that. I'm all for justice. Such as this woman, not in jail, but on the stake should be put, such a thing to do to a child." "Well, well, well. And who is this woman? What did she do?" "Well, clearly she left the child to die. I don't know who she is. I didn't touch her, and I didn't show my face at all. I've been sitting here. You see, it's warmer here, and it's my place. You can warm up some tea. I've got alcohol. Then, too, I just boiled some water. I was lucky to get some food, and then the headlights slid by the windows. It's rare to see anyone here, and suddenly they're in a car. Who I think they are, I'll have to see. I've got a good view here. I always have to be on the lookout. I see a woman with a sports bag get out of the car. Did you get a good look at her? I can't tell you exactly what her face looked like, but she raised her head, looked through the windows. Young, pretty even, I remembered her clothes, blue coat, blue scarf, hair with red hair, smooth, red and black bag, and she was quick as a button, and she was out the door. I thought she had to go out, maybe why else? I even wanted to scare her, well, to make a joke, but I didn't have time. She almost came out at once, and she hopped into the car and drove away. She looks around like a thief, though she didn't steal it, but left her bag. And then what happened? Did you see what was in the bag? How could I? I went downstairs. I saw her standing there. Not right at the entrance, but in a corner, but how could I not see what's in it? Maybe something good, maybe money. In some movie I saw, the same poor guy found a bag, opened it, and there were wads of it. It didn't end well for him, but I could have handled it. Yeah, so I open it, and there's a little kid, alive though, eyes flapping and a good one, a pacifier in his mouth. So what's next? What's next for me? What am I supposed to do with him? I don't know how to deal with kids, and in general, it's not my thing. I don't know how to hold him. I'm afraid I'll hurt him. I went to change into something decent, so I wouldn't scare people. I think I'll go to the crossroads. There's a gas station. Put this bag in a prominent place and go. There's a lot of people there. They'll find it. They'll call the police. I don't want to meet them again. So are we gonna share anymore? We will. Mason took out another bill, gave it to the storyteller. Here I am, shaking off the chalk from my jacket. I hear a little kid squeak, and how do you drag a squeaky kid? You'll get yourself killed. I think, at least let him calm down, and then downstairs again, there was some stomping, rustling, boos and sighs. Well, I think, thank God, I'm back. My conscience is awake. But why aren't they in the car already? I went out on the platform, and she was there. John, is she still mumbling? Then she went to the exit. I saw another woman coming out, but a different one. You sure you saw this one? Well, I'm not blind. Already blonde, not red-haired and not in a coat, but in a simpler jacket. The first one was in heels, clumping, and this one without, in sneakers. She also looked back, as if she was afraid that they would catch up with her and take her away. I saw her face, also young and beautiful. She also had a bag in her hand, from some store, green like that, and she ran fast and fast over there, in that direction. She didn't carry the bag by the handles, but clutched it to her chest like a child. Tell me, will you be able to identify these women and testify in court? Seeing that the kid was stumped, Mason decided to calm him down. You won't be in any danger, but you'll be helping an innocent man. The woman who took the baby was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And the one who left him here, she's not the mother, but sort of the boy's nanny, was not tried at all. Gee, a tenner for saving a man? And nothing for that bastard? No. Well, that's too much. I see, I'll testify. How could I? And not for money. Don't think so, I'm for justice. I've suffered because of them myself. She wanted to ruin a child and set another person up, but she got away with it. What a snake. The case was returned for further investigation, and 6 months later, Emily was released. The imprisonment, though short, was not easy for her. It seemed like an eternity to her. She couldn't even believe she was being released. She was once again a completely free, guilt-free person. And the other news she'd learned at the trial could have knocked a tougher person out. She stepped out of the gate and stopped, having no idea where to go now, but it turned out that Mason was there to greet her. Happy release, Emily. I don't see any excitement, do you? Hello, Mason. I'm concussed by the excitement, but also by all the other news. I don't know how to react. Why don't we go to my place now? You'll rest in peace and quiet, and then I'll tell you everything you need to know. Is this the kind of concussion you're going to have? Don't be frightened, not in a bad way. You'll like everything you hear. Is there any more good news in the world? However, I think I've had my fill of misfortune. I can live peacefully for the next few years. I can guarantee you that. At home, Mason gave Emily a chance to take a bath, clean up, and asked, "What would you like right now? Eat, sleep, or just coffee or tea?" "Just coffee. I realize you do have important news. I need it. You've probably already guessed the big one. Your son is alive." "Yes, this is the Harry." "Oh my God! Oh my God! How can this be?" The girl pressed her palms to her face. "His Majesty is chance, gentlemen, an incredible coincidence, and the will of some people who understand happiness in their own way. Jennifer, Ethan's wife, gave birth just as Betty, your aunt or foster mother, was in labor. I'm sorry, I don't know your relationship, but she gave birth to a weakened, sickly baby. In fact, the doctors doubted he'd be born at all, and the mother would survive what was happening. The child, which was also a boy, couldn't take it, and Jennifer spent 3 days in intensive care, unconscious, lost a lot of blood, and then it was just about time for you to go into labor. You had a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and Betty decided to switch babies, that is, to give Jennifer yours, and tell you that the baby was dead. Oh my God, Betty's mom. She loved me. I thought she did. She did. She just showed her love the way she knew how. She didn't think you needed a baby right now. She saw how I was suffering, how I didn't want to live, and she didn't say a word. She comforted me and knew the baby was alive. It just happened. What people do out of the goodness of their hearts. So happy Jennifer and Ethan took the baby, not knowing that it was only related to one of them. A short time later, Ethan's wife was killed in an accident. Her friend, Nora, volunteered to help with the baby. Unfortunately, she had her own views on the man. She wanted to marry him, and she wanted a baby. She realized that the baby would be a nuisance, so she decided to get rid of it. You mean, just throw it away? Emily asked in horror, so that my son would die of cold and hunger. It turns out so. If I had thrown him where it is crowded, the child would have been found. And your heart must have led you to a place where your son was in danger. Yes, I can't see any other explanation, but where is my boy now? Come on, he's at his father's house, and they're waiting for us there. I talked to Ethan. He doesn't really believe it's your kid, but it's not hard to prove. And this Nora, is she there too? She's been arrested. She's going to trial, and so is your foster mom. Pack up and go if you're ready. Of course I'm ready. Are you coming with me? Like my lawyer or something? I don't know what Ethan's gonna come up with. Ethan didn't greet them very warmly. Hello, Emily. I'm sorry, but I find it hard to believe that you, and not my wife, gave birth to this baby. I don't care what you believe. Where's my son? Pressing Harry against her chest, looking into his blue eyes, she felt all the resentment, all the anger evaporate as if it never existed. Not just Ethan or Mason, she would forgive Nora now. In that moment, as she kissed the tiny fingers, admiring every cell of her own, she was magnanimous, ready to forgive. Emily, this is my son. I hope you realize that. Ethan tried to talk to her. I have a test. I already know who I gave birth to him. Don't worry, I'll take the test too and prove that he's mine. And don't worry, I don't want your hand and heart. I just want my baby. The girl finally took her eyes off her treasure for a moment. But I'll take my son. I sympathize with you, but now that I've found my child. But I don't have to give him back. Ethan was obviously very agitated. He turned to Mason. You're a lawyer. Tell me, I have an advantage, don't I? The baby's lived with me since birth. He's got a nanny here, all his stuff, everything he's used to. Yeah, and a variety of stepmothers who don't know what else they'll come up with. Emily, too, was beginning to realize the precariousness of her position. Wait, now is not the time to argue. Mason stopped them. Emily will make a test, prove that she is the biological mother, and then you can already peacefully agree on the order of communication with the child. Now many fathers and mothers live separately, but understanding the interests of common children helps them find a reasonable compromise. That's what we agreed. Harry stayed with his father, Emily. Mason took her home. She had to calm Edward, for whom it was hard news what his wife had done, who had also been arrested. Emily, do you believe I didn't know anything? He rushed to his adopted daughter. I would never let Betty do that. I can't even believe she would do something like that. Of course I believe it. Uncle Edward, don't you worry so much. I'm sure Aunt Betty will be released soon, or not so soon, but she'll be back, and I'll bring my son, Harry, home soon, and we'll all live together. We could use a grandfather. Without waiting for the test results, Emily, along with her foster father, began to prepare a room for her son. But there were many more trials to go through before she could take over as a mother. There was another trial, and as a result, Emily and Ethan were given equal rights to raise their child. It was hard for the father to accept that from now on his son would not always be around, but there was no arguing anymore. During the course of the litigation, they often had to see Emily and argue and negotiate peacefully. At some point, he wanted to explain himself to her, to apologize for his actions, to tell her who Jennifer was to him. But it didn't matter to Emily anymore. I forgave you a long time ago, Ethan. When I thought my son was dead, it was such a grief that I just forgot about you and your betrayal. And now that he's around, I'm so grateful that you have him, but no more. Do you think we could be together for Harry's sake? I mean, it's terrible for the baby, having to live in 2 houses. What can we do? We'll try not to make it awful. We've been through too much, and now we've got to keep the child out of it, and living together wouldn't do any good. I guess you're right. Well, I'm getting what I deserve, I guess. You could still get married, have kids. I don't know. After this, I'm hardly going to be able to come out of it with a clean slate. After this conversation, happy Emily went home with her son for the first time to introduce the boy to his new home and grandfather. Ethan stayed in an unusually empty apartment. This is how his free time from work would be spent, alone, in the company of the TV, but it could have been different. If Jennifer had not returned, he would have lived with his beloved wife Emily, with his dear son, because he loved Emily too. Maybe not as much as Jennifer, but he did, or if Jennifer hadn't brought that damn Nora so close to him. Maybe then he and Jennifer would have been okay, too. She wouldn't have died. Yeah, life's a strange puzzle. You make the wrong move and everything changes. Not necessarily for the better, but maybe all is not lost. He and Emily will see each other a lot about their son, and maybe that'll bring them closer together. Ethan was wrong. It didn't. Yes, they met every week, sometimes more than once, but they weren't even meetings like ex-spouses. Communication was limited to only the most general words. In Emily's life, there was another man, Mason. Increasingly often coming to his son, Ethan met there a lawyer. Once he even asked, "What are you doing? Getting married?" "I'm sorry, but it's none of your business." Emily replied softly. Without any explanations, it was clear that a new stage in her life was coming, probably a happy one. Such a blossoming, beautiful young woman. "I don't mean it in a way that's any of your business, of course, but Harry. He's just a little boy, and suddenly there's a new man in the house, always there for him. Is he going to call him Daddy? Neither Mason nor I are going to insist on it. Besides, Harry knows you're his daddy. He loves you. And Mason? I think he'll have enough respect from his son, and it's hard not to like him. Do you have any idea how secure he makes me feel? Yeah, have mercy. Now that you're being threatened. And then what? Nothing except your left foot suddenly decided Jennifer was better, and you left me without so much as an eyebrow. I'm sorry to remind you, you haven't even called once to ask how you're doing. Does that say you're reliable? And about the danger. I now know how unstable everything is in this world. You were a normal, decent woman, and suddenly you're doing 10 years in the penitentiary. Can you imagine what would have happened to me if Mason hadn't been there? You're right, of course. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know I'm not worthy. I'm very grateful that at least you don't persecute me, don't berate me every minute of the day. Tell me, Emily, when our son grows up, will you tell him this story? Ethan suddenly asked. I don't look that far ahead. I haven't thought about it. No, I don't think I'll tell him. Why should I? Maybe later he'll be interested in what Helen's grandmother did time for. Maybe not. But our history in all details, he does not need to know it all. I think it's better not to guess at all. I don't even speculate about my relationship with Mason. Maybe we'll get married. Maybe we won't. Ah, sure. Emily and Mason got married when Harry was a year and a half. She was very happy, having found not only maternal happiness, but also feminine happiness. She was worried, though, that she and Mason might not have children together. After the birth, the doctor said something like that. And I would like so much to take care of a small child, a newborn, breastfeed him. I was deprived of such happiness with my son, she said to her husband. But why not? With modern medical advances, Mason wondered. A visit to the doctor dispelled all doubts. I don't see any obstacles to childbearing. An elderly woman gynecologist said sternly. And 2 years after the wedding, almost 4-year-old Harry became a big brother. Emily and Mason had a baby girl. Ethan continued to be a frequent visitor to their home. He loved his son very much and tried to visit him as often as possible. He himself remained a lonely man, giving all his strength to work. Sometimes women appeared in his life, but they were short meetings without obligations. He no longer believed that personal happiness was possible for him. Everything has to be paid for. He thought, if I hadn't been so mean to Emily back then, who knows? Maybe now I would have a beautiful, full family and her daughter would be mine. But he realized that nothing could be undone.